In the year of our Lord 1892, the town of Ethelburg, Massachusetts, was a place of staunch, Gilded Age prosperity. Its cobblestone streets were swept clean, its newly installed gas lamps hissed with comforting regularity against the encroachment of the New England twilight, and its merchants spoke in hushed, satisfied tones of railroad bonds and textile futures. Ethelburg was a town that believed, with near religious fervor, in the tangible, the recorded, and the proper, which is perhaps why it so studiously ignored the entity that loomed on the ridge just west of the town proper, Whitford Manor. The manor was not a house, it was a blight. It was old money, so old it had soured. Built by a rumored loyalist ancestor who had trafficked in more than just molasses and timber, the house stood against the skyline like a rotten tooth. Its architecture was a confusion of Gothic severity and sagging colonial decay. Windows, like cataracts, stared blankly over the prosperous valley, and the grounds were a riot of thorn and thistle. The townsfolk, practical people, simply did not go there. They did not speak of the Whitfords, and when forced to, they did so with a peculiar flatness of tone as if discussing unfortunate weather. The last of the line, the final dregs of this spoiled legacy, were the brothers, Isaac and Eli Whitford. Both were 19 years of age. They were seen infrequently in Ethelburg. They would arrive in a listing, unkempt carriage drawn by a horse as gaunt as its master's to procure necessary supplies: flour, salt, lamp oil, and, for Isaac, specialty inks and books ordered at great expense from Boston. They were identical in feature, both possessing the same sharp, aristocratic nose, the same thin-lipped mouth, the same unsettlingly pale blue eyes. But there, the similarity ended. Isaac was the shadow. He was the one who wore steel-rimmed spectacles, who kept his lank dark hair tied back with a leather cord, whose fingers were perpetually stained with graphite and ink. He was the reader, the watcher, the one who walked with a slight stoop, as if already burdened by the weight of the moldering books he consumed. He spoke only when necessary, his voice a dry rasp, and his gaze lingered on the world as if it were a poorly written text he was forced to edit. Eli was the echo, but an echo that had learned to sing. He was the one who engaged with the world. He wore their father's threadbare but well-cut coats with a desperate, slouching elegance. He let his dark hair curl just so, and he possessed a smile that was both dazzling and deeply alarming. It was a predator's smile, deployed to charm the baker's daughter into giving him the day-old bread for free, or to make the stable boy look away, flustered, rather than question why the Whitford horse looked half-starved. Eli was restless energy, a coiled spring of vanity and malice, chafing against the rod of his inheritance. They were alone. Their father, a man of brutal temperament and whispered vices, had succumbed to a wasting sickness a year prior. Their mother, a spectral figure long before her death, had preceded him by 5. Now the brothers, poised on the precipice of manhood, were left with only the house, the debts, and the silence. And the silence, in Whitford Manor, was a very loud thing. It was an active, pressing weight. It was the absence of servants' footsteps, the absence of laughter, the absence of life. On this particular evening, a cold October wind rattled the ill-fitting window frames. In the grand library, a room where the smell of mildew and leather was overwhelming, Isaac sat hunched over a massive, worm-eaten tome bound in what looked unsettlingly like pigskin. The book was not from their father's collection. Isaac had found it walled up in the wine cellar behind a crumbling partition of brick. Eli paced. He loathed the library. It smelled of Isaac. "This is intolerable," Eli hissed, his voice cutting through the scratching of Isaac's pen. He stopped at a window, wiping the grime away to look at the distant glittering lights of Ethelburg. "They're having the harvest ball tonight. Can you hear the music? Faint, but it's there. They are dancing, Isaac. Eating spiced cakes. And we are here. We are where we belong, Eli," Isaac murmured, not looking up. His spectacles had slid down his nose. "We are Whitfords. That is a curse, not a distinction," Eli spat. He picked up a porcelain figurine from the mantelpiece, a shepherdess, and inspected it with contempt before closing his fist. The porcelain crunched. He let the fragments cascade onto the hearth. "I am 19. I am meant for more than this. More than dust and this infernal, endless quiet. It is not quiet, Isaac said, finally looking up. His pale eyes, magnified by the lenses, seemed enormous. You just aren't listening properly. Eli froze. The wind had died down, and in the sudden vacuum of sound, he heard it. He had been hearing it for months, dismissing it as rats, or the house settling. It was a sound from below, from the earth. A sound like 1,000 dry leaves skittering over a stone floor. A sound like a slow, deep inhalation. The cellar, Eli whispered, his cultivated boredom evaporating, replaced by a prickling animal fear. Not the cellar, Isaac corrected, a strange, thin smile touching his lips. He turned a page in the pigskin book. The parchment crackled. The hollow, as great-grandfather Silas called it. And I believe, he said, tapping a spidery diagram on the page, that it is hungry. The cellar of Whitford Manor was a place of profound cold. It was not the damp chill of a typical New England basement. It was an active, penetrating cold that seemed to leach the warmth directly from bone marrow. It smelled of spoiled wine, ferrous earth, and something else, an antiseptic, inorganic odor, like ozone or static. Eli held a kerosene lantern high, its yellow light throwing grotesque, dancing shadows across the fieldstone walls. His breath plumed in front of his face. This is madness, Isaac. We are hunting rats. It's beneath us. We are not hunting rats, Isaac said. He was strangely animated, his usual scholarly stoop replaced with a focused intensity. He carried the heavy pigskin journal under one arm. We are verifying a hypothesis. He led them past the crumbling wine racks, past the cistern choked with cobwebs, to the far wall. This was the oldest part of the foundation, laid by Silas Whitford in 1744. Here, the construction was different. The other walls were rough-hewn granite. This section, a perfect 10 by 10 foot square, was made of something else. It was a stone they did not recognize, black and oily, fitted together with impossible precision, without a hint of mortar. This is the place, Isaac said, his voice hushed with reverence. He ran his ink-stained fingers over the surface. It was not cold, like the rest of the cellar. It was perfectly unnervingly neutral. It's a wall, Eli said, impatient. A well-built wall, perhaps, but... Be quiet, Isaac commanded. Listen. Eli sighed, annoyed, but he obeyed. He leaned closer. The sound he'd heard in the library, the dry, skittering whisper, was here. It was behind the black stone. It was the sound of an immense, dry weight shifting. And beneath that, a low, sub-audible thrum, a vibration that Eli felt more in his teeth than his ears. What is in there? Eli asked, his charm replaced by the vulnerability of a 19-year-old boy in a dark basement. Not in there, Isaac said, his eyes gleaming behind his glasses. It is the there. Silas's journal calls it the hollow. He did not build this wall. He built the house around it. He found it. He called it a lesser space, a wound in the world's skin. Isaac opened the journal. The page he had marked showed a diagram of the house, with the black wall depicted as a pulsing dark star at its foundation. Silas believed it was a filter, Isaac read, translating the archaic script. A place where the unwanted could be tithed. He writes of offerings, of strengthening the line. He says the house feeds. Feeds on what? Eli said, stepping back. This is spiritualist nonsense, humbug. Is it? Isaac looked at his brother. Remember Father's wasting sickness? How the doctors from Boston were baffled. How he seemed to diminish, to become less. A memory surfaced. Their father in his final days, not just thin, but faint, as if the color was being leached from him. And remember Mother, Isaac pressed, his voice soft. How she would lock herself in this very cellar for days, claiming the headaches were better in the cold. And how, when she finally passed, she weighed no more than a child. Eli's face was pale. You are suggesting? I am suggesting, Isaac said, that this house has a price, and that our parents paid it, unwillingly. Silas writes that the hollow demands a tithe. If it is not given freely, it takes from the nearest source. The dry whispering behind the wall intensified, as if in agreement. We are the nearest source now, Eli, Isaac stated, closing the book. We are all that is left, unless we provide for it. A new, terrifying understanding dawned on Eli. This was not about rats. This was about their survival. The house, their prison, was also their parasite. "It's hungry," Eli whispered, staring at the black, seamless stone. "It is famished," Isaac agreed, "and we are starving it. Look at the state of this place. The rot, the decay. The house is eating itself because we are not feeding it." "Then what?" Eli began, his voice trembling. "Do we feed it?" Isaac looked around the cellar. His eyes landed on a wooden crate filled with their mother's abandoned things: water-damaged books, a tarnished silver mirror, a box of letters. "Silas began with that which held memory," Isaac said. "The hollow consumes. It doesn't just eat, it erases." The experiment began simply. Isaac, with a strange academic fervor, insisted on methodology. He retrieved one of their father's empty ledgers and a pot of fresh ink. "We must document," he explained, lighting a separate lantern on a small three-legged stool. "This is science, Eli. Practical philosophy." "It is grave robbing," Eli retorted, but he did not leave. The cold in the cellar was intensifying, and the whispering from the wall had taken on a demanding, insistent rhythm. It sounded like sand falling in a vast, empty hourglass. "Item 1, Isaac declared, his pen scratching. "A doll, belonging to our late mother." He picked it up from the crate. It was a small porcelain thing, its painted face cracked, its lace dress yellowed and stiff. "It was her favorite," Eli said, a flicker of sentiment he did not know he possessed. "Exactly," Isaac said. "It must have resonance. Wait, it must be missed." Isaac held the doll and approached the wall. He stood a foot away, then two. The whispering focused, zeroing in on the object in his hand. "How?" Eli asked. "Do we throw it?" "Silgas's notes are unclear," Isaac admitted. "He writes only of presenting the tithe to the threshold." Isaac extended his hand, holding the doll out. Nothing. He stepped closer, 6 inches from the black, oily stone. Still nothing. The wall remained inert. "This is folly," Eli scoffed. "Patience." Isaac's voice was tight. He edged closer until his knuckles were almost brushing the surface. Then it happened. It was not a pull. It was a release. The space between Isaac's hand and the wall seemed to pucker. The air pressure in the cellar dropped, making Eli's ears pop. The doll did not fly from Isaac's grasp. Instead, it seemed to unwind. The porcelain cracked, not with a sound, but with a thinning of its substance. The lace dress dissolved, its fibers separating. The painted face seemed to melt, the blue eyes smearing into the white. It was not destroyed. It was unraveled, drawn into the black stone like thread being pulled from a tapestry. In less than a second, it was gone. Isaac yelped and snatched his hand back, rubbing his fingers. "It's cold!" But the cellar was not cold. Not anymore. The oppressive, bone-leaching chill was gone. In its place, a neutral, almost comfortable temperature remained, and the house sighed. It was a sound that traveled through the very beams of the manor, a deep structural groan of satisfaction. Above them, they heard the settling of timbers, a long, shuddering exhalation that seemed to shake the dust from the rafters. Eli stared at Isaac's empty hand. "Good Lord. Did you feel that?" Isaac was breathless, his eyes wide and manic behind his spectacles. He looked invigorated. The sallow, scholarly pallor of his skin seemed for a moment to recede. "The house," Eli said. "It liked that," Isaac finished. He hurried back to the ledger and began writing furiously. "Offering accepted. Ambient temperature normalized. Subjective effect invigorating." He turned back to the crate. More. For the next hour, they fed the hollow. They offered their mother's tarnished silver mirror. The reflection in the glass warped, bending inward toward a vanishing point before the silver flaked and the glass dissolved into glittering dust, drawn into the stone. They offered their father's box of correspondence. The letters, detailing failed investments and bitter family feuds, were drawn in, the ink lifting from the paper itself crisping and vanishing midair. With each offering, the house felt more solid. The air grew warmer. The faint, persistent smell of mildew began to recede, replaced by the clean scent of dry wood and old paper. The brothers, too, felt it. The gnawing, hereditary hunger in their bellies eased. The constant fatigue that had plagued them for months lifted. Eli felt a warmth in his chest, a confidence, a vibrancy that he had only ever read about. Isaac's mind, usually a fog of morbid thoughts, felt sharp, crystalline. "It works," Eli breathed, running a hand through his hair. He felt strong. He felt handsome. "It works," Isaac confirmed, scratching his notes. "But the effect? It's transient. The journal warns of this. These are appetizers. The hollow is sated for now. But its appetite will return, and it will demand more than trinkets." Eli looked at the black wall. The whispering had stopped. It was silent, replete, and deeply, deeply patient. "It wants life, doesn't it?" Eli said. It was not a question. Isaac stopped writing. He slowly capped his inkpot. Silas wrote of vagrants, of those who would not be missed. He called it culling the herd. A silence settled between them, different from the house's silence. This was a silence of shared, unspoken calculation. The morality of the act did not occur to them. It was, as Isaac had said, a practical matter. The house was a machine, and they had just learned how to fuel it. "A vagrant, then," Eli said, his charming smile returning, darker and sharper than before. "The railroad brings them through Ethelberg every day. Men looking for work. Men no one will ever ask after." Isaac nodded, adjusting his spectacles. "A proper scientific test. We must see what it does to a living subject. We must observe the after effects." The days following the first feeding were transformative. Whitford Manor, for the first time in the brothers' memory, felt like a home. It was, at least, no longer actively trying to consume them. The change was physical. The house, having tasted the resonant memories bound to the objects, began to repair itself in subtle, impossible ways. A long, jagged crack in the dining room plaster simply was not there one morning. The persistent leak in the west wing, which had stained the wallpaper with maps of brown continents, dried up. The air, once thick with the particulate matter of decay, seemed to clear. The brothers, in turn, thrived. They were feeding on the house's stolen vitality. Eli's languid charm solidified into a palpable magnetic force. When he went to town for supplies, the baker's daughter, who had once eyed him with suspicion, now blushed and gave him an extra loaf of bread, her eyes downcast. Mr. Hemlock, the grocer, found himself unable to say no when Eli asked for his order to be placed on account, despite the mountain of existing Whitford debt. Isaac, meanwhile, felt his mind expand. The complex ciphers in Silas's journal, which had previously been impenetrable, now unfolded for him. He read of the hollow's nature, of its connection to the thin places of the world. He discovered that the Whitford line had been tending this entity for generations, feeding it to draw power. Their father had failed. He had been weak, ignorant, and had tried to starve the entity. The house, in turn, had starved him. He thought it was a demon, Isaac explained to Eli one evening as they sat in the library. The gas lamps, which had once sputtered, now burned with a bright, steady white flame. He was a fool. It is not a demon. It is an engine, a force of nature. It consumes that which is, and in return, it grants stability, presence, weight. But as Isaac predicted, the effect was transient. After a week, the chill began to creep back in. The old smells, mildew, rot, dust, returned to the air, faint but present. The house was hungry again. The brothers felt it too. The old fatigue, the gnawing emptiness, the pallor, began to return to their faces. "It's fading," Eli noted, examining his reflection in a now clean mirror. "I feel thin." "The trinkets were not enough," Isaac said, poring over his notes. "The house requires a more substantial meal. It needs caloric density. It needs life." The unspoken agreement made in the cellar now hung between them, demanding action. They were no longer 19-year-old orphans, trapped in a decaying house. They were its masters. And the masters had a duty to perform. They began to plan. Isaac was the strategist. Eli, the bait. It cannot be a townsperson, Isaac stipulated, ticking points off on his stained fingers. Ethelberg is a town of ledgers and gossips. A missing person here would raise an alarm. The sheriff, for all his ineptitude, would be forced to investigate. A drifter, Eli confirmed. As we discussed, one of the tramps that ride the rails. A hobo, they call them, Isaac said, tasting the new slang with disdain. Yes, one who arrives on the afternoon train and plans to leave on the morning one. A man with no ties, no name that matters. I will handle it, Eli said, buttoning his father's best wool coat. It seemed to hang better on his shoulders now. They often congregate by the rail spur near the grain elevator looking for a night's work. Be persuasive, Eli, Isaac said. When am I anything else? Eli flashed his devastating smile. And you? Prepare the cellar. Make the threshold ready. Eli walked to Ethelberg, forgoing the carriage. He felt the walk, the crunch of the frost-hardened road, the bite of the November air. The world seemed more vivid, and he felt his place in it more keenly than ever. He was a lord walking his lands, even if those lands were owned by the bank. He found them, as expected, huddled behind a stack of timber near the rail spur. 3 men, faces grimy with soot and desperation, sharing a small fire in a rusted barrel. They looked up as he approached, their eyes wary. Eli deployed his newfound house-gifted magnetism. He did not approach them as a benefactor, but as a confidant. He slouched, put his hands in his pockets, and spoke their language. Cold night for it, gents, he said, his voice easy. One of them, a burly man with a matted red beard, spat into the fire. No colder than most. What's it to a swell like you? I'm no swell, Eli lied smoothly. Just a fellow in a tight spot. My brother and I, we live up on the ridge. The manor. He jerked a thumb. Our furnace? It's given up the ghost. The old man who used to tend it passed on. We've got a cord of wood that needs splitting and hauling to the cellar before this freeze sets in right. It's too much for me and him. I can offer $1. And a hot meal. $1 was a fortune. A hot meal was paradise. The 3 men looked at each other, but the red-bearded one was suspicious. The Whitford place? Heard stories. Heard it's unwell. It's old, Eli countered with a shrug. And we're poor. That's the long and short of it. The stories are just stories to scare kids. Look, he said, I don't have time to beg. It's $1 and stew. Yes or no? He directed his gaze at the smallest of the 3, a man who looked younger, weaker, shivering in a threadbare coat. The man's stomach growled audibly. I'll go, the young one said. Name's Thomas. The red-bearded man grunted. Your funeral, Thomas. Don't come crying to us when them ghosts get you. No ghosts, Eli smiled, clapping Thomas on the shoulder. The man flinched, but Eli's grip was firm, reassuring. Just cold wood and hot stew. Come on, Thomas. Let's get you fed. As Eli led the shuffling, grateful man up the ridge path, he felt a thrill so potent it was almost giddy. He was not just charming. He was wooing. He was a shepherd, leading a lamb to the slaughter. And the house, he could feel it even from here, was waiting. The whole vast, decaying structure seemed to be holding its breath in anticipation. Isaac was waiting in the kitchen. He had, as promised, prepared a meal. A thick, bubbling stew of salted pork and old root vegetables sat on the hearth, filling the cold room with an almost wholesome aroma. The gesture was so mundane, so domestic, it was grotesque. Thomas, the vagrant, shuffled in, his eyes wide, taking in the cavernous, shadow-filled kitchen. He clutched his thin coat around his chest, his gaze darting from the high, cobwebbed ceilings to the 2 young men watching him. Smells fine, sir, Thomas stammered. Sit, Thomas, Eli said, his voice honey-smooth. He gestured to a stool by the fire. Eat. You must be frozen through. Isaac ladled a heavy portion into a wooden bowl and handed it, along with a thick slice of the bread Eli had procured, to the man. Thomas ate with a desperate animal hunger, hunched over the bowl, hardly chewing. The brothers watched him. Isaac observed with the detached curiosity of a biologist examining a specimen. He noted the man's chapped skin, the dirt under his fingernails. the way his left eye twitched from fatigue. He was a creature of no consequence, a footnote in a census that would never be taken. Eli observed with the satisfaction of an artist. He had created this moment. He had plucked this man from the world and brought him here. He had bent reality with a few soft words and the promise of stew. When Thomas was finished, scraping the bowl clean, he looked up, his gaze filled with a pathetic gratitude. "Thank you, sirs. Truly. Now, about that wood, you show me where." "Of course," Eli said, rising. "It's in the cellar, this way." "Bring the lantern, Eli," Isaac said, his voice flat. "I will fetch the splitting maul." Eli nodded, the silent communication passing between them. Isaac would be behind him, to ensure Thomas did not bolt. Eli led the way, lantern held high. Thomas followed, rubbing his full belly, his suspicions eased by the warmth and the food. They descended the stone steps into the familiar penetrating cold of the cellar. "Golly," Thomas whispered, his breath pluming. "It's cold down here, all right, colder than outside." "It's the stone," Eli said conversationally, walking toward the far end. "It holds the chill. The woodpile is just back here." He led Thomas past the cistern, toward the black, oily wall. The whispering had already begun. It was louder this time, excited. A sibilant rushing sound like a fast-approaching storm. Thomas heard it. He stopped. What's that noise?" "Just the wind in the foundation," Eli said smoothly. "The house is old. It makes noises." "That don't sound like wind." Thomas was backing away, his eyes darting to the steps. I think I'll fetch the wood in the morn, sir, if it's all the same. I'll sleep by the fire if—" He bumped into something solid. It was Isaac who had descended the steps silently. In his hand he held not a splitting maul but a heavy iron fireplace poker. Thomas's face crumpled in understanding. "Please, I got no money." "We know," Isaac said. "This isn't about money," Eli said, his smile vanishing. Thomas's terror was a new, intoxicating spice in the air. He looked from Eli's charming, cold face to Isaac's academic, merciless one. He saw the black wall. He felt the thrum. He bolted. He tried to shove past Isaac, screaming, a thin, reedy sound that the stone walls seemed to swallow instantly. Isaac, surprisingly strong from hauling books, shoved him back. Thomas stumbled and fell, scrambling backward on the floor, crab walking away from the brothers, his eyes fixed on them. "Please, no, I got a sister in St. Louis. She'll wonder." "Will she?" Isaac asked, genuinely curious. He took a step toward the man. "Get up, Thomas," Eli said, his voice suddenly sharp, commanding. Thomas, out of sheer reflex, obeyed. He staggered to his feet. He was now backed against the black wall. What is this?" he whimpered, tears freezing on his cheeks. "A tithe," Isaac said. The brothers advanced. Thomas, in a final pathetic burst of defiance, lunged at Eli, who was closer. Eli, energized by the house, sidestepped the clumsy attack. Isaac brought the poker down, not on Thomas's head. That would be messy, and they didn't know if the hollow would take damaged goods, but hard across his knees. Thomas shrieked as his legs buckled and he collapsed, his back scraping against the black stone. The effect was instantaneous. The wall did not wait for a presentation. The moment Thomas's living, terrified flesh made contact, the hollow claimed him. It was not the gentle unraveling of the doll. This was a violent, hungry act. The whispering became a roar. The air pressure plummeted, extinguishing the lantern in Eli's hand, plunging the cellar into near-total darkness, illuminated only by the lantern Isaac had left by the steps. Thomas's scream was not cut short. It was unwound. It stretched, thinned into a whine, and then silence. The black stone sucked him in. It was as if he had fallen into a body of black water, but in reverse. His clothes flattened against his body, his features distorted, and he was pulled through the solid stone. There was a wet, tearing sound, a final, despairing gasp, and then nothing. Where Thomas had been, there was only the blank, oily, seamless stone. Not a drop of blood, not a scrap of fabric. The house groaned. a deep, shuddering, ecstatic sound that vibrated up from the foundation and into the brothers' very bones. The cellar, which had been freezing, was suddenly intensely warm. Isaac and Eli stood in the dim light, breathing heavily. Then the rush hit them. It was a power so profound, so intoxicating, it was almost physical. Eli felt it as a surge of pure, golden vitality. He felt impossibly strong, impossibly clever. The world, which had always seemed a dull gray thing, was suddenly illuminated in brilliant, sharp-edged color. Isaac felt it as an intellectual explosion. The world's secrets seemed to lay bare before him. He understood the mathematics of the hollow, the physics of its consumption. He saw the interconnectedness of things, the tapestry of the world, and he saw, with perfect clarity, how to pull the threads. "My God," Eli whispered, but it was a profanity, not a prayer. He was laughing, a breathless, giddy sound. Isaac pushed his glasses up his nose. His hands were shaking, not from fear, but from exultation. "Subject, consumed," he whispered, as if dictating to his ledger. "Complete, physical and conceptual removal." He looked at the floor. He said he had a sister. He was lying, Eli said, his voice full of a new resonant power. "No," Isaac said, a slow, terrible smile spreading across his face. "I don't think he was. But she won't remember him now. That, Eli, is the true test." The brothers did not sleep. The energy from the hollow was too potent, too electric. It was like high-grade caffeine and opium combined, a simultaneous sharpening of the senses and a dreamlike expansion of the self. They spent the night in the library, the fire roaring in the hearth, though the house was now warm in every corner. Eli paced, restless, flexing his hands, feeling the new, thrumming power in his limbs. "I could run to Boston," he declared, "and not even break a sweat." Isaac, however, was in his element. He sat at the great desk, Silas's journal open, his own ledger beside it, writing with a speed and clarity he had never before possessed. His handwriting, usually a cramped, spidery scrawl, was now a bold, elegant cursive. "It's not just the person, Eli," he explained, his pen flying. "It's the fact of the person. Silas calls it conceptual erasure. The hollow doesn't just eat the man, it eats his place in the world. It eats the memories of him. It eats the ripples he made. So the men at the rail spur will not remember him," Isaac finished. "They will remember a cold night. They will remember talking to you. But the third man, Thomas, he will be a blur, a smudge, a thought that never quite formed. We must be certain," Eli insisted. The pragmatism of their new existence was settling in. "This power is useless if we are hanged for it." "Precisely," Isaac agreed. "The test, we go to town. Tomorrow. We do not ask about Thomas. We simply listen." The next morning, they took the carriage. The horse, which had been fed scraps of the new vitality through the very air of the stable, seemed stronger, its coat less dull. Ethelberg was bustling. The cold snap had held, and the citizens hurried about their business, their faces pinched. Eli left Isaac with the carriage and sauntered toward the rail spur, whistling. He looked for all the world like a young lordling without a care. He found the same two men huddled by their smoking barrel. The red-bearded one was tending the fire. Eli tipped his hat. "Morning, gents. Still cold, I see." The red-bearded man looked up. His eyes held suspicion, but also confusion. "You, the swell from the manor." "I am," Eli smiled. "I came to thank you for your friend." The man frowned, rubbing his beard. "Friend? What friend?" "The man who came with me last night." Eli pressed, his heart hammering with anticipation. "Thomas, to split the wood." The man stared at him. "What in blazes are you talking about? It was just me and Pip here." He jerked TA, gesturing to the other man. "Same as it's been all week. We saw you, sure. You came flashing your coin, trying to hire one of us." "And?" Eli asked. "And we told you to get lost," the man growled. "We don't work for your kind. The unwell Whitfords. Now scat, you're bothering us." Eli's smile became genuine. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a nickel. He tossed it. The man, Pip, snatched it from the air. "My apologies," Eli said, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "Must have been dreaming." He walked away, his stride confident. He met Isaac, who had just exited the grocer's, Mr. Hemlock bowing him out, a ledger clear of debt in his hand. "Well?" Isaac asked quietly. "He never existed," Eli reported. "They have no memory of him. None at all." Isaac nodded, satisfied. He had just experienced a similar phenomenon. "I spoke with Mr. Hemlock. I convinced him that our father's outstanding debt was, in fact, an overpayment. He apologized for the clerical error and advanced us a line of credit." "You convinced him?" "The house provides," Isaac said simply. "It seems this new vitality, it makes the world more suggestible. People wish to agree with us. It is easier for them than not. They were, in effect, ghosts, but ghosts who could rewrite the story of the living. They drove the carriage to the town hall." Isaac, on a whim, asked to see the visitor's ledger from the sheriff's office, claiming he was looking for a package that might have been misdelivered. The sheriff, a portly man named Bellows, was, like Hemlock, surprisingly accommodating. "Whitford, you say? Aye, go on, don't make a mess." Isaac ran his finger down the logbook for the previous day. It listed new arrivals, transients, and official business. There were 3 entries for vagrants who had been warned to leave town by morning. The names were Red O'Malley, Pip Squeak, and a blank smeared line, as if the ink had been intentionally blotted out while still wet. "What's this?" Isaac asked, pointing to the smear. Sheriff Bellows squinted at it. "Huh, that's peculiar. Must have been a slip of the pen. My hand ain't what it used to be. Means nothing. Now if you're done, Mr. Whitford." Isaac closed the book. It was done. Thomas, the man with the sister in St. Louis, was not just gone. He was unwritten. As they rode back to the manor, the implications of their power settled on them. They were not merely murderers. Murderers left bodies. They left evidence. They left a hole in the world that demanded justice. The Whitford brothers left nothing. They left a smooth, seamless surface. They could pluck a person from the tapestry of life, and the threads would simply weave themselves back together, as if the missing thread had never been part of the pattern. "We are gods," Eli whispered, looking at the passing forest. "No," Isaac corrected, his gaze distant, fixed on the looming shadow of their home. "We are editors, and history is a very poorly written book." The next few months were a golden age for the Whitford brothers. With the full vital offering of Thomas, the hollow was sated, and the house, and by extension its masters, was imbued with a power that was both subtle and absolute. Whitford Manor was no longer a place of decay. The brothers used their new, substantial line of credit, procured through Eli's effortless, supernaturally charged charm, to hire workmen from a neighboring county, men who had never heard the dark stories of Ethelburg. The roof was repaired, the windows reglazed, the rotten timbers of the porch replaced. The house did not just accept the repairs, it seemed to absorb them, the new wood blending seamlessly with the old, the entire structure taking on a hale, if still severe, appearance. The brothers, too, remade themselves. They ordered new, fashionable suits from a tailor in Boston. Eli, in dark, perfectly cut tweeds, became a striking figure. Isaac, favoring severe black frock coats, looked less like a haunted scholar and more like a formidable young academic. They began to venture into Ethelburg society. At first the town was wary. The strange Whitford boys were an old, unpleasant habit. But the brothers, flush with the Hollow's power, were irresistible. Eli was the vanguard. His charm was no longer just manipulative. It was overwhelming. He could enter a room, and the entire conversational gravity would shift to him. Women, from the baker's daughter to the banker's wife, found excuses to speak with him, blushing at his subtle compliments. Men who had once dismissed him as a degenerate fop now found him witty, insightful, and dangerously persuasive. Isaac, in contrast, operated in silence. He did not need to charm, he compelled. He would attend town meetings, sitting in the back, observing. When the town elders discussed a new railroad spur, Isaac would stand and, in his dry, rasping voice, offer a suggestion that would completely alter the course of the debate. His arguments were so logical, so dense, and delivered with such unnerving certainty that the elders found themselves agreeing, only to wonder, hours later, why they had abandoned their original plans. They became, in short, the new masters of Ethelberg. They did not rule, they simply adjusted. But their power and their gilded cage came with a new, pressing problem. "Mr. Croft," Isaac said, reading a letter that had arrived. It was printed on heavy, cream-colored bond, bearing the mark of the Ethelberg Bank. "What about him?" Eli asked. He was adjusting his cravat in the grand mirror of the foyer, admiring the pale, aristocratic figure he cut. "He's resistant," Isaac said, frowning. "Your charm secured the credit, Eli, but this letter is quite firm. He notes the irregularities in our father's accounts. He is unconvinced by the evidence of an overpayment." "He'll come around," Eli said, unconcerned. "They all do." "He won't," Isaac insisted, tapping the letter. "He's an outside element. He was transferred here from Boston only 2 years ago. He has no local memory. He doesn't have the ingrained generational fear of the manor that the others do. He operates purely on numbers, and the numbers don't add up." The letter was polite but firm. Mr. Alistair Croft, the bank manager, was calling in their father's original massive loan. The recent repairs, he noted, suggested the Whitfords were not as destitute as they had claimed. He was threatening foreclosure. Foreclosure? Eli's handsome face darkened. "He cannot. This house is us." "He can," Isaac said, "and he will. He is not susceptible to the aura. He is like a stone in the water, Eli, the current parts around him. He is an inconvenience." The house, too, sensed this threat. The brothers felt it. A subtle chill had returned to the air. A faint, expectant whisper had resumed in the lower levels. The hollow, comfortable for months, had been disturbed. It sensed a threat to its providers. "Then he must be removed," Eli said, his voice flat. "Yes," Isaac agreed, "but this is different. This is not a nameless vagrant. This is Alistair Croft, the manager of the Ethelberg National Bank. He will be missed." A new, thrilling, and dangerous phase of their experiment was about to begin. The hollow had erased a man who barely existed. What would it do to a man who was, in his own way, a pillar of the community? A man defined by ledgers, records, and daily appointments? "This is the real test, brother," Eli said, a slow, predatory smile returning to his face. "Can we erase a man of substance? Can we unwrite an entry in the town's great ledger?" "We must," Isaac said. "The house, it demands it. It feels the threat. And," he looked at his own hands, at the fine wool of his coat, "I find I am unwilling to return to our previous state of squalor." "Then it's settled," Eli said. "We shall invite Mr. Croft to the manor to discuss the accounts." Before the brothers could enact their plan for the banker, a new element arrived in Ethelberg, one that would irrevocably alter their calculations. The harvest season, culminating in the annual Harvest Ball, brought visitors from Boston and Providence, and with them came Miss Beatrice Vane. Beatrice Vane was everything Ethelberg was not. She was 19, the same age as the brothers, but possessed a worldly confidence that made the local girls seem like unpainted wooden dolls. She was heiress to a shipping fortune, educated at Vassar, and possessed a wit as sharp and bright as a surgical scalpel. She was in Ethelberg visiting a distressingly dull aunt, and she made no secret of her boredom. She was also, as Isaac noted with detached interest, a creature of record. She was relentlessly documented. Her arrivals and departures were noted in the social columns of the Boston Evening Transcript. She wrote letters daily, and, most importantly, she carried a constant companion, a 5-year diary bound in blue Moroccan leather, in which she recorded every observation, conversation, and private thought in a tiny, meticulous script. Eli saw her first at the grocer's, where she was arguing with Mr. Hemlock about the inferior quality of his imported tea. Eli, flush with the hollow's power, was captivated. She was not like the simpering, easily swayed girls of the town. When he approached and offered a charming practice greeting, she looked him up and down with an appraising, almost amused insolence. "You must be one of the Whitford boys," she said, her voice clear as a bell. "My aunt warned me about you. She said you were unwholesome. I must say, you don't look unwholesome, just tragically fashionable for such a backwater." Eli, for the first time in months, was thrown off balance. His charm, his supernatural magnetism, seemed to slide off her. She was shielded by her own colossal vanity and self-possession. He was instantly, pathologically, obsessed. He reported this to Isaac. "She's immune to the effect." Isaac, who had been drafting a letter to Mr. Croft, looked up, his interest piqued. "Immune? How? Is she like Croft?" "No," Eli said, pacing the library. "Croft is a blank, a wall. She is a counter-frequency. She is so herself, so utterly convinced of her own reality that the suggestion finds no purchase." Isaac found this fascinating. A person of such conceptual weight could be a threat or a prize. "A prize," Eli agreed, his eyes glittering. "She mocks me." A new dangerous idea began to form. The plan for Croft was simple, brutal subtraction. But Beatrice was a challenge. "The harvest ball," Eli said. "It's this Saturday. She will be there. I will convince her. And if you cannot, then we will have our answer," Eli said. "But think of it, Isaac. That vagranty, he gave us months of power. He was nothing, a wisp. What would she give us? A creature of such substance, a girl who writes everything down, a girl who is known. What would the Hollow do with such a feast?" The logic was undeniable. The banker, Croft, was a problem of defense. Beatrice Vane was an opportunity for advancement. His erasure would be a simple patch. Hers would be a fundamental upgrade to their power. But a new, unexpected emotion was stirring in Isaac. As he watched Eli preen, as he listened to his brother obsess over the girl's wit, her immunity, her presence, Isaac felt a cold, familiar stone drop in his stomach. It was jealousy. It was not for the girl. He had no interest in her. It was jealousy of her. She was, for the first time, an object that held Eli's complete, undivided attention. For their entire lives it had been Isaac and Eli. Isaac, the brain; Eli, the face. A perfect closed system. This girl, she was an intruder. "Be careful, Eli," Isaac warned, his voice drier than usual. "Your enthusiasm is making you reckless." "Reckless?" Eli laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. "No, brother, I am for the first time inspired. I will have her. And then we will have her." The night of the harvest ball, Eli was a vision. He wore his finest black suit, a cravat of dark silk, and the Hollow's gift sat on him like a royal mantle. He entered the Ethelberg town hall and a hush fell. He was, quite simply, the most magnetic and terrifying thing anyone had ever seen. He found Beatrice by the punch bowl, looking profoundly bored. "Miss Vane," he said, bowing. "Mr. Whitford," she replied, not missing a beat. "You've come to loom. How Gothic." "I've come to dance," he said, offering a hand. She looked at his hand, then at his face. "And why should I dance with you? You have the reputation of a wolf, and I am not, I assure you, a lamb." "Because," Eli whispered, leaning closer, allowing the full, potent force of his magnetism to focus on her, "I am the only remotely interesting thing in this entire dreadful room. And you are the same." She paused. He saw for the first time a flicker, a slight dilation of her pupils. His power was not failing. It was just working harder than it ever had to. It was like pushing against a heavy locked door. But the lock was beginning to strain. "One dance," she conceded. "But if you step on my gown, I shall make a scene." He led her to the floor. As the string quartet began a waltz, they moved. And as they moved, Eli worked. He did not speak of the weather or her aunt. He spoke of Boston. He spoke of her desires. He spoke of the profound, crushing weight of small-minded people. He mirrored her own arrogance, her own boredom, and amplified it. He was not charming her, he was validating her, and she, who had never met an ego that could match her own, was slowly, reluctantly drawn in. "You are not like them," she murmured as he spun her. "You are different. You see things." "I see everything," Eli replied, his voice a hypnotic thrum, timed to the music. "And I see that you are wasted. Here, there are antiquities at my home, Whitford Manor. Things you would appreciate, old books, things from before." "My aunt forbids it," she said, but her voice was weaker. The door was beginning to unlatch. "Your aunt," Eli said, "is a fool. Come tomorrow, in the afternoon. We will discuss poetry and other forgotten things." The waltz ended. He released her. She looked for a moment disoriented. The sharp, bright confidence in her eyes was fogged just slightly at the edges. "Perhaps," she whispered. "Tomorrow, in the afternoon." Eli bowed and walked away. He did not look back. He left the hall, leaving a stunned, silent crowd in his wake. He returned to the manor to find Isaac waiting, the library dark save for a single lamp. "It is done," Eli announced, pouring himself a brandy. His hand was shaking. The effort had been immense. "She will come?" "She will come." Eli drained the glass. "And Isaac? I have never felt anything like it. The resistance, it was delicious. The feast she will provide, it will be biblical." Isaac watched his brother, who was flushed with victory, with a new, cold clarity. Eli was not just feeding the house. He was an addict, and he had just found a new, more potent drug. And Isaac, the eternal scholar, was now, terrifyingly, just the facilitator. Beatrice Vane arrived at Whitford Manor precisely at 3 o'clock the following afternoon. She came alone in a hired buggy, having dismissed her chaperone with a crisp, unarguable command. She had dressed for the occasion in a severe dark green traveling suit, as if for an intellectual duel. She carried her blue leather diary under her arm. Eli greeted her at the newly repaired door. He was all smiles and effortless grace. "Miss Vane, you honor our home." "Your home is formidable, Mr. Whitford," she said, stepping into the foyer. Her sharp eyes darted everywhere, taking in the restored woodwork, the polished floors, the unsettling quiet of the house. "And surprisingly well kept. The stories in town paint a picture of Gothic squalor. The stories are, as a rule, written by the ignorant," Eli said, leading her toward the library. "We value our privacy." Isaac was waiting. He rose stiffly as she entered. "My brother Isaac," Eli introduced. "Mr. Whitford." Beatrice nodded, her gaze appraising. "The reader, I'm told." "Miss Vane," Isaac replied, his voice a dry rasp. He felt an intense, irrational dislike for her. She was a foreign body in his sanctuary. "Eli mentioned antiquities," Beatrice said, getting straight to the point. She was all business. "He spoke of forgotten things." "We do," Isaac said, gesturing to the shelves. "The Whitford collection is extensive." For an hour, they played a game. Eli was the charming host, retrieving rare books, pointing out their father's collection of Roman coins. Beatrice was the sharp interlocutor, testing their knowledge, her wit flashing. Isaac was the silent observer, watching the dynamic, watching how Eli's charm, so potent in the town hall, now seemed to be coating Beatrice rather than penetrating her. She was still, at her core, inviolate. "This is all lovely," she said finally, setting down a volume of Ovid. "But it is not what you promised, Mr. Whitford." "Oh?" Eli asked, tilting his head. "You promised me forgotten things," she said, her voice lowering. "Things before. You spoke of the small-minded. This," she gestured to the books, "is just history. I want the secret." Eli and Isaac exchanged a look. She was not just immune, she was drawn to the power. Her arrogance was a different kind of hunger. She sensed the darkness in the house, and rather than being repelled by it, she was curious. "The secret, Miss Vane," Isaac said, his voice flat. is not for tourists." "Oh, I am no tourist," she smiled. "I am a collector of experiences. And you, gentlemen, you are an experience. Now show me, or I shall leave and write in my diary." She patted the blue book. That the famed Whitford brothers are, in the end, nothing but a provincial humbug. It was a direct challenge, and it was a fatal mistake. "You are right," Eli said, his smile returning, but this time it held no warmth. "The true collection is below." He picked up a lantern. "The cellars are delicate, but you, I think, will appreciate them." Beatrice, her eyes bright with victory and excitement, followed. Isaac came behind, a shadow. They descended the stone steps. The chill hit Beatrice immediately. She pulled her coat tighter. "My goodness, it's Arctic. It is where we keep the oldest vintages preserved," Eli said. He led her to the far end, to the wall of black, oily stone. The whispering had already begun. It was a sound of immense, slavering delight. Beatrice stopped. The intellectual arrogance on her face finally gave way to a primal, instinctual fear. What is that noise?" "That," Isaac said, stepping up beside his brother, "is the secret, Miss Vane." Beatrice looked from the wall to the two brothers. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a matched set, their pale blue eyes identical in the gloom. The charm was gone from Eli's face, replaced by a cold, ecstatic hunger. I think I shall leave now," she said, her voice for the first time trembling. "No," Eli said, his voice the command of a master. "You wanted this." She turned to run, but Isaac was there. He did not grab her. He simply stood in the way. "You are rude," Beatrice snapped, her fear turning to anger. "Move aside, sir." "No," Isaac repeated. She tried to push him. It was like pushing against a statue. The power of the house, combined with his own, rooted him to the spot. Beatrice backed away, her confidence shattering. She backed away until she hit the far wall. The other wall, the black wall. She shrieked. The moment her body touched the stone, the hollow rejoiced. The sound was a deafening roar. The lantern light flickered, the air thinned. Basalt of her wealth, her education, her substance. She was, in the end, just flesh. And she was terrified. The wall pulled. She did not dissolve like the doll. She did not vanish like Thomas. She was flayed. The hollow took her in layers. It took her memory first. Her eyes went blank, her face slack. The name Beatrice evaporating from her mind even as she stood there. It took her wit next. The intelligent light in her eyes died. Then it took her record. The blue leather diary clutched in her hand flew open. The pages, filled with her meticulous tiny script, went blank. The ink leapt from the paper, forming a black, smoky ribbon that streamed into the stone. The empty leather-bound book clattered to the floor. Finally, the hollow took her body. She did not scream. She had no self left to scream. She simply collapsed inward, folding in on herself like a paper doll thrown into a fire, and was drawn, with a final, wet thump, into the blackness. Silence. The cellar was profoundly warm. The house sang. The vibration was so intense the brothers had to brace themselves against the wall. The power that flooded them was indescribable. It was not the giddy vitality of Thomas. This was divinity. Isaac gasped, clutching his head. Equations and symbols flooded his mind. He saw the curvature of space. He saw the thing that lived on the other side of the wall. It was vast, ancient, and grateful. Eli laughed. He laughed, a deep, resonant, booming sound. He felt perfect. He was no longer a 19-year-old boy. He was a principle, a force. They stood in the dark for a long time, absorbing the gift. Finally, Isaac, his voice shaking, lit the lantern. He picked up the blue leather book from the floor. He opened it. Page after page, empty. Perfectly, cleanly empty, as if it had never been written in. Conceptual erasure. Isaac whispered in awe. She is gone. The brothers did not go into town for several days. They did not need to. They were acclimating to the new, profound level of power Beatrice Vane's soul had provided. The house was now perfect. It was not just repaired, it was idealized. The woodwork didn't just shine, it glowed with a deep internal luster. The air was not just clean, it was invigorating, scented with pine and old parchment. The brothers felt it constantly, a low-level hum of pure potential that thrummed in their bones. Isaac's mind was now a place of terrible, beautiful clarity. He no longer needed to read Silas's journal. He simply understood it, as if its contents had been downloaded directly into his brain. He saw the Hollow not as a parasite, but as their partner, an ancient symbiotic god that had chosen their line. Eli's magnetism was now biblical. It was no longer charm. It was authority. He could look at a bird on a windowsill, will it to sing, and it would. He had become the walking, breathing embodiment of desire. But they knew the true test lay outside. Beatrice Vane was not a drifter. She was a Vane of Boston. Her absence must have left a hole. After 3 days, they rode into Ethelberg. The town seemed muted. They went first to the grocer's. Mr. Hemlock, who had seen Beatrice arguing about tea, was whistling as he stacked tins. Eli, in his new booming, confident voice, said, "A tragic thing, Mr. Hemlock. That Miss Vane. So vibrant." Mr. Hemlock looked up, his face a blank. "Sir? Miss Vane? I'm not familiar with the name. A relative of yours?" "No," Eli said, his smile tight. "A visitor. From Boston. She was in here 4 days ago, arguing about tea." Hemlock rubbed his jaw. "Was she? I recall, a lady. But no, I can't quite picture her. My apologies, Mr. Whitford. My memory, it's like a sieve these days." The concept of Beatrice was fading. They went next to the home of her aunt, Mrs. Peabody. The woman was on her porch, rocking, a shawl around her shoulders. She looked confused. "Mrs. Peabody," Isaac said, his voice startling her. "Oh, Mr. Whitford, you gave me a fright. We were sorry to hear about your loss," Isaac said, testing the water. "My loss?" The woman's brow furrowed. I don't... Oh, you mean why, that's peculiar." "What is, madam?" I came to Ethelberg. I'm not sure why," the woman confessed, her voice lowering. "I had a sense of duty. I was chaperoning, I believe, but I cannot for the life of me recall who." She looked at the empty guest room in her house, visible through the window. I feel as if I've forgotten something terribly important, but it's gone, like waking from a dream. How vexing. Did you need something, Mr. Whitford?" "No," Isaac said. "Our condolences on your confusion." It was perfect. The Hollow hadn't just erased Beatrice. It had healed the wound of her absence. It had plucked the threads and then rewoven the tapestry, leaving everyone with a vague sense of wrongness, but no specific memory to attach it to. But the erasure they were to discover was not absolute. A week later, a man arrived on the train from Boston. He was a large man, dressed in a practical, hard-wearing suit. He had a square jaw, cold, analytical eyes, and he carried a single heavy leather satchel. He did not go to the hotel. He went directly to the sheriff's office. He placed a card on Sheriff Bellows's desk. It read, "Alan Arbogast, Pinkerton's National Detective Agency." "I am here," Mr. Arbogast said, his voice a low rumble, "on behalf of the Vane family of Boston." Sheriff Bellows, who was now as susceptible to the Whitford's generalized aura as anyone, just shrugged. "Vane? Don't know him?" Arbogast's cold eyes narrowed. "You will. The Vane family. They have a financial discrepancy. A large sum of money was wired to the bank here, in Ethelberg, to cover the expenses of someone. They can't recall who, but the money is gone. The expense ledger remains." He pulled out a small book. "I am not here following a memory, Sheriff. I am here following the money. And the money leads here, to this town, and to an entry in this book for a Miss BV. And then the entries stop. I am here to find out why. Alan Arbogast was a man built of facts. He did not trade in rumor, he did not believe in ghosts, and he had a profound, methodical contempt for human emotion, which he viewed as little more than static obscuring the truth. He was, in short, the perfect antithesis to the power of the Hollow. The Whitford's ability, amplified by Beatrice, was to manipulate memory and concept. Arbogast operated on a different plane, the record. He began his investigation at the bank. He did not speak to Mr. Hemlock or Mrs. Peabody. He spoke to Mr. Alistair Croft. Croft, the Boston-bred banker, was, as Isaac had predicted, resistant. He was also deeply troubled. "Mr. Arbogast," Croft said, his office door shut, his voice low. "I am relieved you are here. Something is wrong in this town." "I am aware," Arbogast said, taking notes in a small coded shorthand. "I am investigating a financial anomaly tied to the Vane family." Croft's head snapped up. "Vane? The shipping magnates? Good Lord. What is the anomaly?" "A line of credit, a large one, opened for a B. Vane. The funds were transferred. The guest registry at the Ethelberg Inn shows a Beatrice V. checking in. And then, nothing. The chaperone, a Mrs. Peabody, seems to be suffering from profound confusion. The innkeeper, a Mr. Sykes, he lost the registry page." "Lost it? So he claims," Arbogast rumbled. "He seemed terrified when I pressed him, as if trying to remember was physically painful for him." Croft leaned forward. "This is connected. I am having my own difficulties with an account. The Whitford family." Arbogast stopped writing. "Whitford, the name is not in my brief. They are an old family, the only old family. They live in a manor on the ridge, decaying. They were destitute, drowning in their father's debts, and then, weeks ago, they changed," Croft explained. "The sudden, inexplicable reversal of the ledgers, the new, unsettling confidence of the two young brothers, the way townsfolk obeyed them. I am a man of numbers, Mr. Arbogast," Croft said, his hands trembling. "And I tell you, the numbers in this town, they move." I balanced the Whitford account. The next morning, the numbers were different, as if the ink had reformed on the page. Arbogast was silent for a full minute. This was outside his experience. This was not fraud. This was something else. "This Beatrice V," Arbogast said. "Did she have any contact with these Whitford brothers?" I don't know," Croft admitted. "But the harvest ball, yes, the talk of the town, the unwholesome Whitford boy, Eli, dancing with a visitor, a dark-haired girl from Boston. I can't see her face in my mind, but I remember the dance." Arbogast stood up. "Mr. Croft, you are a man of ledgers. I am a man of facts. The facts are these. A woman of substance, Beatrice Vane, arrived in Ethelberg. The record of her finances, her travel itinerary, exists, but the person and the memory of the person does not. This is unnatural, and it points, very strongly, to the only other unnatural element in this town." "What will you do?" Croft asked, terrified. "I will go to the house on the ridge," Arbogast said, packing his satchel. "And I will audit the Whitford brothers." He was not a fool. He knew this was not a simple confrontation. He went to the telegraph office first. He sent a long-coded message to his home office in Boston. It detailed his suspicions. It named the town. It named the Whitfords. It named Beatrice Vane. He was, in effect, creating a record outside of Ethelberg, a record the Hollow could not reach. Then he went to the hardware store. He purchased a spool of heavy rope, a crowbar, and from the sheriff, who was convinced Arbogast was going hunting, he requisitioned a box of .44 caliber cartridges for his heavy Webley revolver. He was not a ghost hunter. He was an exterminator, and he was going to find the source of the anomaly. The brothers knew he was coming. The house told them. The power of Beatrice Vane had made the manor semi-sentient. It was no longer just a parasite. It was a guardian. It could feel the static of Arbogast's disbelief. It sensed him as a foreign object, an indigestible fact that was approaching. The warmth in the house cooled. The whispers from the cellar returned, not hungry, but anxious. "He's coming," Eli said. He was standing at the library window looking down the ridge path. "The Pinkerton man." "Arbogast," Isaac said. He was sitting at his desk, not writing, but listening. The equations and symbols in his mind were fractured. This man's presence, his focus, it was disrupting the connection. "He is like Croft," Isaac diagnosed, "but stronger. He is shielded, not by ignorance, but by conviction. He believes only in what he can write down, and he has written us down." "Then we will feed him to the wall," Eli said, his voice hard. "We will feed his conviction to the hollow. We will erase him and his facts. With him, it may not be that simple," Isaac fretted. The new divine confidence he'd felt was wavering. For the first time he felt fear, the power. It felt brittle. He knows he is not coming here. Curious, like Beatrice. He is not coming here. Desperate, like Thomas. He is coming here, with intent. Then his intent dies with him. Eli spat. He was angry. This man, this clerk, was challenging his world, his perfection. "Prepare the cellar, Isaac," Eli commanded. "I will greet our guest." Arbogast arrived not in a carriage, but on foot. He had walked the 2 miles from the town, his heavy satchel slung over his shoulder. He did not knock. He used the heavy iron knocker, the sound booming through the house like a judgment. Eli opened the door. For a moment the two men stood facing each other. The aura, Eli's profound world-bending magnetism, rolled off him in waves, striking Arbogast. Arbogast flinched. It was, he would later briefly recall, like being hit by a wave of heat and nausea. His vision blurred. He felt a suggestion, a deep, profound order to turn around, to forget, to go home. He gripped the strap of his satchel. He focused on a fact. Fact. My name is Alan Arbogast. Fact. I am here to find Beatrice Vane. Fact. The ledger is in my pocket. He pushed, mentally, against the wave. Isaac and Eli. Whitford. Eli's smile faltered. The man was standing. He was resisting. "You are trespassing," Eli said, his voice straining to maintain its hypnotic resonance. "I am investigating," Arbogast rumbled, and he pushed past Eli into the foyer. The house recoiled. The air shimmered. Arbogast felt dizzy. The walls, they seemed wrong. The geometry, it hurt to look at. "Where is she?" Arbogast demanded, his hand moving to the revolver under his coat. "She is gone," Eli hissed, his charm breaking, revealing the monster beneath. From the shadows of the library, Isaac emerged. "He is strong, Eli. He hurts. The house. What is this place?" Arbogast breathed, his analytical mind struggling to categorize the impossibility of what he was feeling. He smelled the ozone, the ancient dust, the scent of the hollow. "This is Darp House," Isaac said. Arbogast saw it. Truth. He saw the wrongness that powered them. "You fed her to it," he whispered, not an accusation, a realization. "And it will take you," Eli snarled, and he lunged. Eli, powered by the hollow, was preternaturally fast. But Arbogast, powered by a lifetime of violence and fact, was ready. He did not draw his gun. He tackled Eli. The two men crashed to the polished floor. Arbogast weighed 250 pounds. Eli weighed 150. But Eli was strong, impossibly strong. Eli screamed a sound that wasn't human. It was the shriek of the hollow itself. The windows in the foyer shattered. Isaac panicked. The plan was broken. The logic was gone. He ran, not to help his brother. He ran to the cellar. The fight in the foyer was not a brawl. It was a war of realities. Arbogast was pinned under Eli, but Arbogast had his gun. He pressed the muzzle against Eli's chest. Eli froze. He looked down at the gun. He looked at Arbogast. A fact. Arbogast gasped, his lungs burning from the unnatural pressure in the brain house. This bullet is a fact. It will end you. Eli believed him. The aura, the power, it couldn't stop a physical object. It could only convince, and this man wouldn't be convinced. Isaac, Eli screamed, help me. But Isaac was gone. In that moment, Eli understood. Isaac hadn't run to get a weapon. He had run to safety, to the hollow. He left me. The realization was colder than any cellar. The bond, the perfect closed system, was broken. Isaac loved the hollow more than he loved him. The power in Eli soured. The divine energy curdled into pure venom. He left me, Eli whispered. Arbogast heard the shift. He saw the fracture. Yes, Arbogast hissed. He left you to die. Now talk. What is this place? But Isaac was not fleeing. He was calculating. He reached the cellar. The black wall was throbbing. It was starving. The fight upstairs, the presence of Arbogast, it was draining the house. The hollow needed to be fed. Now it needs a tithe. Isaac thought, his mind racing. A big one, something of profound substance. He looked back up the stairs. He heard Eli screaming. His name, Eli. Eli, his substance. The final betrayal. The ultimate offering. If I give it. Isaac realized, his heart pounding with a terrible, cold logic. If I give it my other half, the aura, the charm, it will give me everything. I am coming, brother, Isaac shouted up the stairs. His voice convinced. Eli heard him. He's coming. He didn't leave me. The power surged back into Eli. Rage, pure, focused rage. He grabbed Arbogast's wrist, the one holding the gun. Snap, the sound of bone breaking. Arbogast roared in agony. The gun clattered across the floor. Eli rose up, his face a mask of perfect, beautiful hate. You touched me, Eli hissed. He grabbed the larger man by the throat and dragged him. Arbogast kicked, clawed, but his facts, his logic, were useless against this pure, hollow-fed strength. "Isaac!" Eli roared, dragging the Pinkerton man toward the cellar steps. "I have the offering." "Yes, brother," Isaac called back from the gloom. "Bring him down." The cellar was alive. The black wall was no longer a wall. It was rippling. It was a maw. The air was vibrating so hard that dust was shaking from the beams. Eli threw Arbogast down the stone steps. The detective tumbled, crashing onto the floor. His satchel burst open. Ledgers, notes, telegrams scattered. Facts, records. The hollow hissed. It hated them. "Isaac!" Eli commanded, walking down the steps, his eyes fixed on Arbogast. "The house is ready." "Yes," Isaac whispered. He waced, looking at Arbogast. He was looking at Eli. Arbogast saw it. Even in his agony, his analytical mind saw the betrayal. "You fool," Arbogast gurgled, clutching his broken wrist. "He's not waiting for me." Eli stopped. He turned. Isaac was standing by the wall, but he was holding something. A long iron crowbar, the one Arbogast had bought. "What are you doing, Isaac?" Eli asked, the rage faltering, replaced by a cold, confused dread. "A final experiment, brother," Isaac whispered, his face a mask of academic fever. "Silas wrote of an ultimate tithe, a sacrifice of kin blood and kin soul. He was too weak to do it. I am not." "Isaac, no. The house wants you." "Eli!" Isaac shrieked, his voice cracking. "It always wanted you. You are the charm. You are the life. I am just the reader. But when it takes you, it will give me its mind." The betrayal was complete. Eli looked at his brother, the one person in his life, and he saw a stranger. "You would feed me to a wall?" Eli whispered, his heart imploding. "It is not a wall," Isaac screamed. "It is a god." Isaac lunged, not at Eli, but at Arbogast. He grabbed the Pinkerton's gun from the floor. Eli reacted, thinking Isaac was going to shoot him. The brothers collided. This was what the hollow wanted, the two halves of the same soul at war. The cellar exploded. The black wall did not just open, it erupted. A vortex of pure absence tore through the room. It was starving. It was furious. It wanted its tithe. It took Arbogast first. The man was sucked from the floor. His notes, his gun, his ledger, his crowbar, all his facts were unwritten in an instant. His scream was a dry hiss, and he was gone. The hollow roared. It wasn't enough. It wanted the brothers. The force pulled at them. Isaac screamed in terror. This wasn't the plan. He was to be the priest, not the sacrifice. He grabbed onto a stone pillar. Eli was being pulled in. His sliding on the floor. He looked at his brother, clinging to the pillar, his face a mask of horror, and Eli smiled. A true smile. A smile of pure final hate. If I am going, you are coming with me. Eli stopped fighting the pull. He launched himself across the room, not away from the hollow, but at Isaac. He tackled his brother. Together, Eli shrieked, his voice full of mad, joyful venom. No, Isaac screamed. Eli wrapped his arms and legs around Isaac, binding them. A final embrace. The hollow took its ultimate tithe. It pulled the two brothers, kin blood and kin soul, one priest and one sacrifice, into its infinite black maw. Their shared scream was a sound that tore the fabric of the world, and then silence. The house died. It did not burn. It did not collapse. It vanished, the hollow having consumed its masters, its lineage, its entire purpose for existing. Simply ate itself. It consumed the house, the stone, the wood, the nails, the glass, the memory. One moment, Whitford Manor stood on the ridge. The next, there was only a patch of barren, frost-covered ground. In Ethelberg, no one heard a sound. But Mr. Alistair Croft woke up with a start. He felt a headache, a terrible migraine. He had a vague sense of dread and a memory of a detective who never arrived. He went to his bank. He checked his ledgers. The Whitford account was gone, not zeroed out. The page itself was missing from the book. He asked his teller, "Where is the Whitford file?" The teller frowned. "Whitford, sir? How do you spell that?" "In Boston, at the Pinkerton office." A clerk looked at a garbled telegram. It was nonsense. A string of unrelated words. Vain house hollow facts. He threw it in the waste bin. Agent Arbogast was simply listed as lost on assignment. History healed itself. Epilogue 1954. Professor Alistair Finch, a historian from Miskatonic University, was researching New England economic patterns. His work led him to Ethelberg. He found a conundrum. Town records from the 18th and 19th centuries spoke of a prominent family, the Whitfords. They were in every deed, every charter. And then in 1892, they just stopped. No death certificates, no sale of property, no foreclosure. The lineage, the taxes, the name, it just ended. Finch walked up to the ridge where the maps said their house should be. He found nothing. Not a foundation. Not a burned timber. Not a single aged nail. There was only a large, perfectly square patch of ground where nothing grew. The earth was sterile, black, and oily to the touch. The townsfolk avoided it. They called it The Oblot. Professor Finch wrote a chapter for his book. He titled it The Whitford Erasure, a Study in Conceptual Loss. His editor returned the manuscript with a red pen mark through the entire chapter. Alistair, the note read, "This is unsubstantiated fantasy. It is morbid and unfit for a history book. Stick to the facts." The chapter was removed. The brothers, Whitford, Isaac, and Eli, remained exactly as they were intended to be, erased, unwritten, and too evil for history